Vesna Vulovic survived a fall from a record altitude of 33,000 feet. That's higher than Everest. In a fall from this height, a person can reach 260 miles per hour. That's about as fast as the best racing cars in the world. You'd think nobody could still be alive after that, but Vesna Vulovic was, and here's how it happened. Vesna loved the Beatles. She was so inspired by the rock group that she decided to leave Belgrade and move to the UK. She studied at university there and then decided to become a flight attendant so she would have more opportunities to travel. In 1971, she got a job with a major airline. She worked successfully at her job for the next 2 years. But then, disaster struck. January 26, 1972. Yugoslav Airlines Flight 367 was scheduled to fly from Stockholm, Sweden to Belgrade Airport, with stops in Copenhagen and Zagreb. Vesna had recently turned 22. She got on the plane in Sweden. Another employee was supposed to take the flight instead of her, but the airline made a mistake because the two women had the same names. Vesna was looking forward to visiting Denmark, and the plane made a safe flight to Copenhagen. And then it took off from the airport there at 3:15 p.m. At 4 p.m., Vesna was busy with a food cart near the back of the plane. 1 minute later, there was an explosion in the luggage compartment. Vesna was thrown to the back of the plane along with the cart. The cart pinned her against the wall and saved her life. The plane's tail broke off from the main body and plunged to the ground, 6 miles below. The accident occurred near a village in Czechoslovakia. The tail, containing the flight attendant, fell into a dense forest covered with snow on the side of a cliff. Vesna screamed for help. At that moment, one of the villagers was passing by, and they heard her cries. They soon found Vesna and gave her first aid before a rescue team showed up. Immediately after her rescue, Vesna fell into a coma. She stayed like this for several days. She then spent 3 months recovering from her injuries in a Prague hospital. Even after the crash, she wasn't afraid to fly and went home to Belgrade by plane. She returned to her job with the airline, although now as an office worker instead of a flight attendant. The story of Sailor Gutzler, who survived an air crash and sought help all by herself, seems incredible, especially when you discover that this little girl was only 7 years old when it all happened. It was the end of 2014. The Gutzler family was on vacation in Key West, Florida. After a great weekend, they boarded a small plane at Tallahassee Regional Airport and headed home to Illinois. But the pilot soon reported an engine malfunction. The air traffic controller redirected the plane to the nearest airport, which was located at Kentucky Dam State Park. At this point, the plane didn't communicate anymore. At around 6 p.m., it crashed 10 miles from the airport. The plane fell into the densely forested area of Kudowa. Sailor Gutzler had been sitting in the cabin with her family. The plane caught fire and began to plummet. Then the crash. The girl later woke up and crawled out of the wreckage. She immediately went to look for help. After her vacation in Florida, she was wearing only t-shirt, shorts, and one sock. She didn't even have any shoes. It was 38 degrees in the Kentucky woods. At first, Sailor wanted to light a stick from the flames of the burning engine and use it as a torch, but she couldn't find a suitable stick. In light clothes, in the cold, the little girl walked through the dark forest. She passed fallen trees, streams, ditches, and thick brush. She crossed the stream and climbed the hill. Then she saw light shining from a local house. 71-year-old Larry Wilkins was watching TV at home when someone knocked on the door. Larry opened the door and saw a scared, exhausted little girl. The police and paramedics arrived. Taylor was taken to a hospital, but was released the next day. She was more or less healthy. Sailor Gutzler became famous throughout the U.S. for her courage and her incredibly strong desire to live. There was another miraculous rescue in 2009. A 12-year-old French girl, Bahia Bakari, and her mother were headed to Comoros in the Indian Ocean for their summer vacation. The plane left Paris and made a stopover in Marseille. They then traveled to Sana'a, Yemen, where they boarded their final flight, which was supposed to take the tired passengers to Moroni, the capital of Comoros. There was only a few minutes left to go until Bahia and her mother reached their destination. The plane started its landing at 2 a.m. But at this point, the cabin began to shake. The lights flickered and the oxygen mask came down. Bahia was pressed against the window, trying to see the lights of Moroni, but all she saw were the dark waters of the Indian Ocean. She suddenly felt an electric pulse throughout her body. There was an unbearable loud noise and then the crash. The next thing Bahia Bakari felt was water all around her and lots of coughing and choking. It was very dark. The moonlight couldn't shine through the clouds. The young girl found a piece of wreckage from the plane in the water next to her and grabbed a hold of it. At that moment, she was sure she had fallen out of the plane alone because she'd been pressed hard against the window. In the distance, she saw city lights. The nearest dry land was 9 miles away, but the sea's waves began to carry the girl away from the shore. Bahia drifted in the ocean for 9 hours. Her strength began to leave her, and her thoughts became confused. Fortunately, she noticed a lifeboat in the distance. Bahia tried to scream, but there was no energy left in her lungs. However, a man on the boat noticed her. Bahia pushed away from the wreckage to swim to the boat, but the waves swallowed her. The man dived after the girl and saved her. Bahia was taken to the shore and received first aid. She was then sent home to France for treatment. She spent 3 weeks in the hospital. She became famous all over the world as a girl with a miraculous story. She later wrote a book about how she survived the disaster. On Saturday, November 14, 1992, a 31-year-old Dutch woman named Annette Herfkens and her fiancé boarded a flight in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. They were going on a romantic trip to Nha Trang, a resort on the South China Sea. The plane started to shake 50 minutes after takeoff. Annette didn't have her seatbelt fastened, and she bumped against something hard and passed out. Her body slid forward under the seats, and this probably saved her life. Annette woke up a few hours later in the plane's wreckage. She climbed out and found herself in a dense jungle. She was injured and couldn't walk, but she didn't feel any pain for a long time because of the shock. She had survived a terrible accident, but another ordeal lay ahead of her. Annette spent 7 days in the Vietnamese jungle. She tore off some of the material from the plane's heat insulation to make a sponge. She used it to absorb rainwater, which she could drink. Annette studied her surroundings and tried to plan her actions to avoid panic. She expected to survive a week without food, but hoped she could find something to eat in the jungle. Annette had a sense of unity with nature. She felt the life in every leaf, raindrop, and insect. As each day passed, the jungle seemed more beautiful. She was able to find happiness in the terrible situation, and it helped her survive. On the 7th day, she heard branches snap and saw a man wearing an orange vest. At first, she thought she was hallucinating, but he was real. She was taken to Ho Chi Minh City and then transferred to a hospital in Singapore. 10 years later, Annette returned to the jungle to recreate her journey through nature in her mind. She also met the mother of the man who had saved her.